Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Michael Downey, Library and Information Services Coordinator at the AWRI, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, the first for the 2016-17 program. Now it's my pleasure to welcome today's presenter, Gregoire Patacq, a process scientist with the AWRI. In this webinar, Gregoire will discuss the current situation and future for luxury and fine wine in Australia. Now, before I hand over to Gregoire to get us started, a couple of quick notes on what you can expect, particularly for those that are new to AWRI webinars. The format is a short presentation followed by a Q&A. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view via the AWRI website. It's important to remember that webinars are interactive and there are a number of ways that you can get involved. To ask a question, please type into the question section of your control panel in the bottom right corner of your screen. Now, for those with access to a microphone, there's also the option of speaking directly with our presenter by clicking the raised hand button, and this is located in the top left section of your control panel. And if you'd prefer to ask a question via email, please do so at infoservices@awri.com.au. Feel free to send your questions through at any time, and once we get to the Q&A, I'll get as many questions to Gregoire as possible. And just finally, if you'd like to get involved through Twitter, please use the Twitter handle @_AWRI. Okay, that's enough from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Gregoire to get us started.
All right, thanks, Michael. Hello, everyone, and thanks for attending the session today. So, as Michael said, it's going to be roughly 20 minutes of presentation, and after that, we have some time for the question and answers. So, we'll talk today not about Australia, but about South Australia and about an evaluation of luxury wine businesses in South Australia. So this mission started with PIRSA about a year ago, where they launched a diagnostic on the overall food, luxury and functional food in South Australia. And with Vince O'Brien from the AWRI, we undertook the wine industry. And so what we'll talk today about is going to be so we'll define firstly the fine and luxury wine, so we'll see what it's about. Then we'll talk about the South Australia situation and have the results on it, and the results of my study. And finally, we'll talk about a proposition or a solution that I think would be interesting for Australia. So first, to give you a bit of context, luxury today is, everyone's talking about it, but in terms of number, there's great growth, and in terms of 2014 for the luxury good, it was 8.2% growth, which was massive, nearly 2-digit. And when it comes to fine wine, or when it comes to wine, the sales growth were led actually by 6% in wine, by the fine wine, and that was in 2014. And when you see M&A are going at a record pace, which is merger and acquisitions, at the moment, basically the bigger companies are acquiring little companies in order to have a better economy of scale at a global scale. So let's talk about now the definition of what is fine and luxury wine. If you ask a consumer, they will go for, it's no compromise on quality, doing the best product you can get. It probably has an influence on from the location where you are, so the terroir, everyone's talking about it at the moment here, and the fanatical attention to detail. And so this is right, this is true, but it's just a part of what it is actually in a luxury brand. So if we see the other components, is that we see that there are 6 different components that are part of what builds a luxury brand that is in the fine wine industry, and this is according to the literature. So if we go through them, we can see that it starts with history, and so you must have a solid storytelling in order to make sure that you're going to engage with your consumer and your customers as well. The location, so someone told me one day, location. It matters a lot for the consumer in order to understand where you come from and why do you do that over there. So it's an easy bound for the consumer, but it's as well a lot of potential for in terms of tourism. Next, we have the value-driven emergence, where it comes with high prices, which is not that evident, as we'll see later, and scarcity. So we have, for example, two examples for scarcity. You have the normal scarcity, which is a limited amount of bottles produced, and you have as well the perceived scarcity, which the Maison Boulanger from Champagne is doing currently, which is releasing a certain amount of bottles on the market to keep the prices up and having a perceived scarcity. As well, when you talk about a luxury brand, it's all about culture, which is really important. And if you go for exclusivity, people would tend to think it's similar to scarcity, but it is not. So exclusivity is an example is like adapting the place from like the luxury shops are doing, or some wineries in France are doing, where just the entry makes you understand that you need to be wealthy to enter the shop or to enter the winery, which is sort of a natural barrier of selection, which matters a lot to actually achieve those components. Talent sourcing as well, getting the best people in order to get the best product in the end and the best experience, and leadership. What you're going to do is going to matter, and you have to be the first. Then marketing. I know that this is a complex topic with some winemakers to talk about marketing, but and that's why I quoted, "We do not do marketing," which was in a study. Because marketing is considered too short-term and opposed to those long cycles that the wine industry needs in order to craft some new wines. But yeah, and then the art connection as well in regard of marketing, which is appealing to those high-end consumers that are high net worth. So if you take an example, in 1954, Baron Philippe de Rothschild started to made every new year a new label that was made by a new artist. And so, yeah, this is an example. And for sure, marketing means advanced customer relationship. You have to understand, and you have to, you have to go as much as you can on to understand your customer and to foster that relationship. Then endorsement, obviously, so it has to be at a national and at a global scale, which we'll see that it's important after that. And social media. So currently social medias are a hot topic and a hard topic to address and to assess, as I could see with a few other wineries. Yeah, a study that I read recently advises on picking not just one but two different social media in order to perform, and you have to perform in those two and be very good. And the selection of those social media would be according to your core target. So who are your consumers and what social media do they use, and according to this, just tap on this one. So yeah, that is a short overview of what today are the different components of a luxury brand and how you can access to the fine wine, to the super fine wine market, thanks to those components. And I have to emphasize on the fact that there has to be a balance of those 6 components if you actually want to achieve luxury. So now the second part is about South Australia. We'll talk about what I did in South Australia. So what I wanted to do is that I wanted to understand what was the situation, and so I tried to visit as many wineries as I could that were famous and known to be some part of the best. So what I did is that I did a selection through a triple crossing between Langton's List, James Halliday's Guide, and personal advices from AWRI, the winemakers from AWRI. And so we contacted 50 wineries, and out of those 50, 19 accepted to meet. And so here are some names. So the interviews were exclusively with the managing directors, head winemakers, or the owners, and the interview usually lasts 2 hours, and we were talking about every different components of the luxury brand that we just talked about. So some more names. And so what we saw, first thing, this is to give you an idea about the standards, so 95.6 on James Halliday's Companion. And because some people had been assessing the wine quality way better than me, I decided not to address at all the wine quality in the interviews. So I was basically talking about every other components that form a luxury brand, but not about basically the wine quality, which is a big debate, I know, but yeah. And so what appeared, to come back to those 6 components, it is important to have the balance of those components. And in terms of South Australia, I had those 20 interviews with those winery, and had a fair few others interview as well with some actors of the industry to get a broader understanding, and some luxury consumers, so high net worth individuals as well. And what I realized is that South Australia's situation is highly disbalanced, with a massive focus on the product quality. So everyone's trying so hard to make the best product and to get endorsement about it, and they're super proud. South Australia is so proud of their history, which is 150 years old, and they completely lose focus on the strategy, the value-driven emergence, and the other components that form in order to have a full understanding of a luxury brand. And so that makes the fact that today those wineries are not meeting the standards and the expectation of those high-end consumers. As well, I was not aware of this before arriving in Australia, but I realized that some wineries were facing what we call the tall poppy syndrome. So just to define it for people who are not aware of it, it's a perceived tendency to discredit or disparage those who have achieved notable wealth or prominence in public life. So basically, people manage or are successful and that make it public, they get social pressure by their peers or by people around them. And I realized that was actually quite a component that was lowering down the level of South Australians' tentative to achieve, to reach luxury. And so in terms of the results, I managed to refine these first results, and I came up with 3 different groups that were characteristic from the different attitudes, results, and understanding that they had from luxury. And so if we have a look, in terms of proportion, we had nearly 2/3 of the wineries I interviewed that we could call, and that are called national iconic premium. Then a 6th, roughly, that was the resign, and finally another part that was the new generation. So if we go through them, so the national iconic premium are highly successful at what they do, no doubt about it, but they will remain accessible to a popular segment, which means that they will not shift the wine price even if they could. So $90 is the max, and complete max, and they could sell out still by putting their key wine at $200, but they won't do that just because of their philosophy. And as well, I realized that those people did not care much about abroad. They had a really strong national strategy in order to engage, and that was really important as well, a direct-to-consumer strategy. So they want to engage with those loyal consumers and make the best out of it, take the best out of it. The resign then, so this is the second group, which are people who initially had a strong intention to evolve, but some local factors or some peers, so top of syndrome, for example, stopped them. And even though they have some fair knowledge and some good expectation towards luxury, they were too much confronted to achieve this, and they stopped it. And I realized that some wineries had the willingness, and they still have it, but there will be followers, and they will try to achieve it if it becomes more public. And finally, the new generation. So these are the people that want to show to the world that they can do and achieve a world-class wine, and are trying to bring a consistency towards the experience. So to come back to those 6 components of that luxury brand. But yeah, they are not mastering all the components because some skills are missing within the region, and so this is why today we are trying to bring on this knowledge and those skills through AWRI. Finally, so in terms of summarize this first part, we can see that a luxury brand is composed, for the fine wine industry, is composed of 6 components, and it's important to have the balance of those 6 components. South Australia is trying to reach it out, but there is a current disbalance in the South Australian situation, and it's divided in 3 groups that we could find. So national iconic premium, the resign, and finally the new generation. The last part now, so IDs. I'm going to introduce you here an ID which I think would be interesting for South Australia and Australia in a war. So let's start with a fact. Why Australia won't get better than France or Italy anytime soon. So what if you take today, if you take two bottles, all right, so let's say you're a consumer, you're a high net worth individual, and you have two bottles, and you're not Australian as well, it's important. You have two bottles, same quality, same price, let's pick a high price, $5,000, and you're wondering which one you're going to pick. In the left you have a French wine, in the right you have an Australian wine. I can tell you that today consumers will always go for the French wine. Why? Well, because it carries this prestige, heritage, history. That is the safe choice. While people don't know much about Australia, they don't know there isn't a clear message towards Australia at the moment. And I realized as well within the interviews that at the moment Australia is just trying to get back so hard on this and using those same weapons as France and Italy are mastering, which are prestige, heritage and history. They're just trying so hard to get back on this same weapon that I think that this basically Australia is always going to lag in the shadow of those two countries, because those two countries have the legitimacy because of the thousands of years that they have of experience, while we only have about 180 years. So that's one first thing. The second thing is, that's a picture I found online. When I was writing my thesis, I was like, how can I understand who is doing the best wine and why are they doing the best wine? And I realized that it was just hard to understand given the number of ways that were possible to do a high quality wine. And as well, when it comes to innovation, the innovation process today is applied on some minor improvements or new techniques, but nothing that is quite understandable by the consumer. And so if you go to the consumer, which is what matters in the end, this end consumer doesn't understand anymore what is innovation in fine wine, up to a point, and this is where it becomes really interesting. When you go for a luxury brand in fine wine, and the literature agrees on this, innovation has disappeared. And this is one crazy thing, I think. Why? Well, it's simple. Well, it's way too risky to make something new. It's too hard to try to craft something that is really different. People are too afraid of the critics and to face public opinion and public shame, and so the results and the outcomes of this is, and even the critics are saying, is that there's a uniformization of the fine wine tastes and the fine wines that are released in the world, and that is sad. That is really sad. But at the same time, I think it's actually great for us, and I think this is what I believe a unique opportunity for the Australian wine industry. What I'd like to do is I'd like to reintroduce innovation as a core component of a luxury brand. Like it's the case for some other brands, but not in this industry, like if you take the car industry or other industries. We have to dare to create. And let's take that example of the two bottles with the French and the Australian. Let's go back where the French still has the same product with $5,000 with high quality prestige, heritage, history. And on the right one, you have this Australian wine. And instead of trying to have this prestige and heritage, you would have something that is completely new, completely innovative. No one has tried it ever before. And everyone's trying to get his hands on it because it's completely new. What do you think this consumer is going to go for? I think that at least he'd consider it. And so I think this is where lies our opportunity. We have to reinterest people about wine and new wines and around its experience, around the new experience. And I think that someone actually managed to do it with a product that initially was not that exciting. And this person is Steve Jobs. I mean, it used to be a simple phone, right? And now it's the most important, it's something that nearly controls our lives. And people are just waiting and craving for the products, and they have super high expectations towards the next iPhone because they want new innovation. They want to see, the new innovation. And they're completely willing to pay the price for it. No doubt about it. They paid a premium already. So in the end, what we need to do, what the real fight is, make wine innovation cool again. So if I give you 1 year to create a new wine, could you? It's a bit of a challenge, I know. And we have to start from the top. We have to make innovation dedicated to fine wine, high-end consumer, and appealing, and we have to appeal those high-end customer. Innovation must stop just tap on the low-tier market, as it's the case of today. And so what would be great to achieve is to have Australia would be perceived by the end consumer as the engine room of the innovative wine of the world. And to conclude, if you actually try to make that new wine, I would say keep it simple. Make something cool, but simple. And focus from the beginning to the end on that end customer, try to understand his need, and make something that is going to be according to his needs or his willingness. And I think that's it for today. If you'd like to if you'd like to contact me further, just you have my phone number or my email, and I'll get back to you, Michael, for the questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Gregoire. As Gregoire has indicated, we'll move straight into a Q&A from here. So please start sending your questions in now. Just a reminder, you can type your questions into the questions section of your control panel. You can click the raise hand button if you have a microphone. And you can also email your questions in at infoservices@awri.com.au. Gregoire will stick around for a few minutes, so we'll see how we go.
So there's a question. Give me a second. Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Can you access the thesis in details? Yep, you could eventually access the thesis. I'll have to get the confirmation from my boss on this, but yep, more than happy to actually share the details. So if you just drop me an email, and I'll be happy to send you this. Any other question?
Don't have any further questions at the moment, Gregoire. Thanks for your question there, Earl. As Gregoire has indicated, you can contact him directly, and I'll include his contact details in the email I'll send out after this webinar. Okay, we've got another question here. I'm just sending it through to you now, Gregoire.
So the question is, thanks for the presentation. Most wine companies around here are trying to differentiate on family history and wine quality. You propose innovation examples, so it's from Ian Napier. Well, we're actually currently working on some different examples, which basically we have different projects on which we are trying to understand the needs of those high-end customers, and after that crafting some new wines that would be bespoke to those fine high-end consumers. And so we are starting from scratch, understanding what is the company situation, and after that going through the overall process through design thinking, for example, and creating those new wines. So far, the wines that we are doing are mainly working on the different packaging and on the emotions that are made around the wine, but we are as well seeing and eventually planning some things where we would change, we would have some innovation towards what is the wine in itself. So another question from Ian as well. How do you create an innovative new wine from existing varieties, not having to replant? So I think, so in a technical way, you might as well speak with other people, but I think that people would be happy to see some other concept and other concepts in order to shift, if you could shift the production in order trying to try some new things, and what would be important would be the communication around it. And there are other components where you could basically, it starts from the vineyard, and I agree with you, doesn't seem that obvious to actually understand how we could change those without replanting some wines, but innovation starts with changing things, whether it's in the vineyard or as well in the winery, and as well in how you can sell the wine. So there are different aspects.
Okay, thanks for your questions there, Ian. We'll give it another 30 seconds, and if we don't get any additional questions, I'll start to wrap the session up. Okay, we won't have any further questions, so we'll finish it now. I'd like to firstly thank Gregoire for presenting today. I'd also like to thank everyone who's joined and attended and took part in today's session. For all attendees, you will receive a follow-up email, and it will contain a link to the recording of this session and also contain a link to the survey. The next AWRI webinar is on the 25th of August. Martin Moran from Sardi will present on the impact of pruning time and temperature on wine attributes. If you haven't already registered for this webinar and would like to do so, please visit the AWRI website. That's all we have for today. Thank you again for attending, and I look forward to seeing you at the next AWRI webinar.